I'm doing great. Glad to be here for episode 44, Ranching Reboot. Doesn't seem like we've done that many of these, but I guess we have.
Yeah, they're starting to pile up.
Yeah. And before we get going too much further into this one, I do want to make an announcement that this will be the last episode for the year. This one will be released next week. This will be the last episode of the year. So for all your listeners, when there's no new Ranching Reboot on your podcast app the morning of December 27th, I told you so. So we're going to take a week off for the holidays, and I want everybody to make sure they have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And we'll be back the first week of January, first Monday of January, with another episode. So, Trevor, welcome to the show, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, and CK's back. It's been a little while since I've seen CK.
First, Brian, I was in Myrtle Beach at National Grazing Lands Coalition or conference, and it was amazing to meet a lot of our listeners in person. So if you guys are listening again, it's actually really great for you guys to come up and say hi to us and just say that you recognize my voice before you recognize who I was. So this is my shout out to you guys.
I was going to ask how that went. Like, did you have a good time? Like, was good speakers that you got to go listen to?
Yeah, Jason Meadows was there. So it was really good. They highlighted a lot of mental health, and I thought it was really great because we haven't seen a lot of that. I'm seeing this transition where it's okay to talk about if you're feeling vulnerable or you're not having the best half year or even years of your life. And so just seeing that change of things that you, Brian, and I talk about, and we're like, we need to talk about this and stop, sweeping it under the rug and thinking that no one has these same issues. Connected with a lot of faces. And what I have to say is funniest is, like Trevor, I think you and I have had calls together before, but it'd be funny for us to meet in person. And then you just realize that you don't look exactly like what you do in Zoom, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that's what they look like in real life. Some of them are really, really tall, some other way around. And I'm just like, okay, you can't tell these things over even Zoom still, how they will be in real life.
So Russell Hedrick is a giant man. Like he is a giant bear of a man. And I didn't get that at all on Zoom.
Yeah.
So Trevor, thanks for joining us. I know you're kind of a busy guy. Let's introduce you to our listeners. Let's start off and where are you at and what are you doing these days?
So Trevor Burian. I'm in western North Dakota. I was born and raised on the ranch I'm on now, and I've been ranching. Been back at the ranch for 11 years, going on my 12th year now. Started out pretty conventionally, not really, just kind of doing what everyone said, what everyone said to do, and did that for about my first 7 years, and ended up going backwards quite a bit, and so I was looking for something a little bit different, and I stumbled across Gabe Brown on YouTube and kind of fell hard into the rabbit hole of regenerative agriculture. And here I am, 3.5 years later, and haven't really looked back. It's been a fun ride, and it's gonna keep. We have a long ways to go, but we have a purpose and have a trajectory forward now.
Okay. I've already heard a couple details that were like different from what I had assumed just from, following you on social media and interacting with you over the years. So tell me about the family ranch. You said you grew up conventional and doing things conventionally. So let's break that down in just a little bit more detail.
Yeah. So here in western North Dakota, my dad and a lot of people around here, small grain farmers, were a little bit too dry to raise corn. There are some people doing no-till dryland corn around here and can get some pretty decent crops, but it's real hit or miss. We're in about a 14 to 15 inch rainfall environment, and so you get west or east of us about 50 miles, and for about every 50 miles you go, you get about another inch of rain. I think it's the same way kind of where you're at in Kansas too.
Yeah.
So we're on the bad side of that before it starts getting more rain. But so my dad grew small grains, barley, wheat, oats, growing up, full tillage, summer fallow. grew up with that, and it, you know, it was tough. I could tell that, my parents weren't making a lot of money. My mom was a school teacher, also, and to help make ends meet. And we didn't grow up lacking for anything, but we definitely didn't have a whole lot of money. So, and then also my dad had a lot of health problems when we were growing up. So I kind of got thrown into the mix in junior high and early high school, taking a lot of the burden, and it really kind of made me not want to come back at all. My dad retired when I was halfway through high school and started uh, putting the cattle out on shares and renting out the place. And I told him I really didn't want to come back to it. So that's kind of how I left things after high school.
So then what happened?
Well, then I think this happens quite a bit. You leave, when you grow up in a rural community and super rural here in Western North Dakota, everyone around you farms and ranches. You don't even realize it's a special way of life. And then you go off to college. I didn't go far, Western South Dakota, and then to Bozeman, Montana. But you even go into those places, you realize that, not everyone grew up the way you did. And it's a pretty special way of life. And you just start missing, I don't know, you start missing home, start missing the countryside. So I ended up back in Dickinson, working for the Forest Service as a wildland firefighter, and started working on my buddy's ranch on the side, and realized I wanted to come back home. So had an opportunity. The people that were leasing my parents' ranch, the lease was up, and this would have been when I was 20, 22. The lease was up, and I also had an uncle who lost a lease and had a whole bunch of cattle with nowhere to go. And so I was able to take on about 80 share cattle from my uncle to so I wouldn't have to go in big time debt getting my own herd started. So that's kind of how I got started back on the place.
Okay. So how much land do you have right now? Like what's your land base and your livestock operation look like?
So the operation I grew up on is 2,200 acres, and I started purchasing that from my parents when I came back here 11 years ago. And then an opportunity came up this spring for us to purchase an additional 1,200 acres right next door. So even though it probably wasn't the smartest thing financially, it was an opportunity we felt we couldn't pass up. So we took the plunge and bought another 1,200 acres. So we're at 3,400 acres uh, right now.
Wow, that's awesome. So, and we can get into it a little bit later of, the economics of how you're making that work. As I think myself, a lot of people and myself included, I think we're pretty far past the point where in most places in the country, you can't buy land anymore and pay for it with cows.
No, absolutely not. And when I first came back to the place, I, looking at it economically, as far as running cattle, I knew I wasn't going to be able to make ends meet just running cattle. So here in Western North Dakota, we got to have good opportunities as far as there being oil field around here. And so I had a job in the oil field when I came back in 2010, working in working at a gravel pit in the oil field, screening gravel and crushing rock, and it wasn't a whole lot of fun. And so I did that for about 6 months, and then I started my oil field business, doing noxious weed spraying on pipeline right of ways, and applying herbicide to oil pads and electrical substations. And I'm still doing that to this day. And then also I added an element of doing long haul hot shot trucking to, yep.
Yeah, we almost you had to make a trip right past me a couple weeks ago, and we almost made that work to where you could stop by.
Yeah, and I've actually driven past you a bunch of times, but it's always kind of in a time crunch
Right.
to get stuff down there. And I thought it was going to work out that maybe I could stop in on the way back, but I ended up having to swing back through Denver. But yeah, I've driven through your area a lot of times, but I'm usually a little bit to the west of you. Um, Usually I go Dodge City and south, or Clearwater and south, and you get over towards Clearwater, that is some beautiful grass country. So if your country looks anything like that, you got some pretty good ground.
See, Clearwater, that's a little closer over to Wichita. I think that's east of me.
It'd be west of you. It'd be between you and Dodge City, I think.
Okay, yeah, well, it is a really really pretty area up there. Like between here and Dodge City, if you get out of the river bottom, which is all farmed up and mostly center pivot irrigation, you get up on some of the hilltops and ridge tops, and it is really pretty.
Hmm.
It kind of an underappreciated area of the world, and I think we kind of talked about this last week on the podcast that, and you probably can attest to this driving, back and forth up, through North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma. Kansas, everybody thinks of as primarily a farm state, wheat.
Right.
And everybody thinks of Nebraska as corn. But really, Nebraska corn is just kind of narrow strip down to Platte Valley and then the eastern end of the state. Like the rest of it, the middle half of it and everything on the west, that's all sandhills, and that's literally nothing but cows. And
Yeah.
Kansas, it's kind of almost the same. There's like the wheat production is in a few areas and the irrigation's in a few areas, and the rest of it is just vast open rangelands for cows.
Yeah, I hadn't been through Kansas before 3 years ago, especially or Western Kansas. I'd been through Eastern down the interstate, like, and then through Wichita, and like you said, it's flat wheat fields and corn. But you get over west, and it's rolling hills, it's beautiful grass country, and same with Western Nebraska. When I drive down, I always drive down through Western Nebraska and Western Kansas because I can't stand that just flat driving through fields the whole time. I need a little bit of topography.
I know exactly how that feels. I've started taking the interstate a lot less and taking some of the back roads that go up through the hills. And because, they
Yeah.
build the interstates where it's easy to build the interstates where it's nice and flat. There's a
Hmm.
reason why the roads are there.
Yeah, exactly.
So you catch quite a bit of heat and you on social media, or maybe I shouldn't say you catch quite a bit of heat, but you're really active and engaging with the people that I would say are kind of critical of you or leaving critical comments. So how do you let that not get to you? Because there's times where I
Part
have
of
video that blows up and it's 10 to 1 positive comments to negative comments, but sometimes those negative comments really eat up on you. So how do you stay in a positive frame of mind?
Well, I don't know. I was gonna ask you that same thing because I'm kind of new to TikTok, and I've been putting content on Facebook for a while, but with Facebook, you kind of only reach a set group of people, and you don't expand that. I like TikTok because it'll throw your stuff up on a bunch of different people's, and it's a great way to engage with new people and trying to spread the message of regenerative agriculture. That's kind of probably both of our goals, or all three of
Right.
our goal. And and yeah, you're right. You get a mostly positive comments, people being supportive, but sometimes there's people coming after you. And I, first of all, like replying to those videos, I think it's pretty decent content. A lot of people watch that, and so that's one of the reasons why I do it. But it is wearing when people are just calling you an idiot, and and which I really don't understand those people. I think there's three types of people in the world: the people that'll just watch and never say anything and just scroll, and then there's people that'll comment on the stuff they like and then just scroll past. And then there's a third group of people that seeks out stuff they don't like and just has to comment it. I don't understand that. When I'm on social media, I don't seek out stuff I don't like. That just
Yeah.
seems like it make your existence kind of miserable.
And
Brian, what is it you say? They renting space in your head for free, or what is it
the
you say?
haters, you're
It-
haters.
Yes.
I like haters. Like haters are almost as great as super fans. Actually, they're better because a super fan, you have to work to keep them engaged. You have to work to keep their attention. Somebody that doesn't like you, that just follows you around the internet to talk shit on all your social media, I mean, that's a hater. And that's better than your number one fan because you already get to live in their head rent free and you don't have to work for it at all.
Yeah, and I'm accumulating a few of those as we go, but I don't know. It comes with the territory. If I didn't want, that's a part of putting yourself out there and trying to engage people and spread the message. You're gonna get those. So, I'm not gonna lie. It's there. There's been probably afternoons that have been ruined because uh, someone said to me, and even how stupid it is. Yeah, if the more you continue, you just have to learn from it. And if I'm gonna stay on that app, I'm gonna have to learn to let shit run off my shoulders.
I just take a break. Like if it gets too
Yeah,
much, I just take a break. I try not to open it for a while and
yeah, exactly.
let things cool down. Like the comments will eventually trail off. The algorithm will quit feeding people your video.
Yeah, and I posted that feedlot. Someone asked my opinion on feedlots the other day, and
I hope you're ready to talk about it again because I'm going to ask
yeah,
you
no,
the same exact question.
that's fine. And I was kind of hoping that that video wouldn't blow up because I was going to get the whole world after me. I was like, oh, just stay below 10,000 views, please.
So Trevor, I'm curious your transition from, let's say, conventional to regenerative mindset, then finding Gabe Brown, like he's going to be the closest guy to you in terms of this. Was there anything in his context that didn't fit yours as far as practicing regen, what you thought regen is?
Yeah, and I've tried a lot of the stuff that he can do, and I've failed at plenty. Cover crops is something he can do better. They get a little bit more rain than us. Not lately, actually. They've had under average rainfall, I think, going on 4 or 5 years now. But I've tried doing like seeding fall rye and then following that with a cover crop, and it hit or miss. I usually either hit on the rye or hit on the cover crop, but just with how expensive it is, not being able to insure forage crops, that's been the biggest challenge. And so I found my niche, like kind of where I think my ranch fits best into regenerative agriculture, is on the grazing side. We have land that was once farmed, and the soils were once good enough to be farmed, but they've been depleted and mined out. And it's still going to make good grassland. And I think if we regenerate the soils, I think we can get it back to as productive as it was when they were farming it, or maybe even before with time. But I think just where we are on the moisture scale, um, I'm gonna focus more on grazing and not farming. And I got when I got into regenerative ag, I got real into the farming side of it, um, and ended up losing money on that too. And still is a struggle because I have a NRCS equip contract to seed cover crops for I think 3 more years, which is fine. I just got into that contract last year, in which I was doing that stuff without that before, which was even harder. But farming has been the biggest challenge. But I wasn't farming before. I got into farming just trying to do some regenerative stuff. So that's been the biggest challenge.
Was that because there was an equip program that would pay you to do that? Is that part of the driver?
Well, yeah. Yeah, so I had broke out before I had discovered regenerative ag. Kind of my business model when I was first started ranching is I would have excess hay. I would put up hay and sell excess hay. And I've sold hay all over the United States, down in the Panhandle, Texas, Western Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado, everywhere. And we had some really wet years, and I was like, oh my God, this is easy. Not really understanding the ecology of, to keep taking those hay crops and trucking them south. And eventually we had some dry years and my soil had no cover. I had mined out pretty much all the organic matter out of it, and it just stopped producing. And so I figured, okay, well, these hay fields are tired out. Everyone says bust them up. So I went and burned down 450 acres of hay ground and tried to start farming them. And that process right there, that's what got me into debt. And then halfway through that process, I found regenerative ag and kind of found a way kind of get out and let's get this stuff back into grass at some point. So.
Okay, so you say you found regenerative ag, and I've pretty much been asking everybody this question lately. How do you define regenerative agriculture?
Oh man, I kind of got this question a little bit on TikTok too, or a similar form of a guy asking me if I thought his farm was regenerative, and that is such a complicated thing because everyone wants to put a label on something, and like this farmer is regenerative or this not. We could put that on labels, but when you get into that, then you're just going to get people skirting the system, you know. So what I think regenerative ag is I think it is like a you come to realization that the whole ecosystem, all the ecosystems work together, and you just got to stop forcing stuff, and you got to start working with the environment you're given, and nudging it in certain ways just so you can improve it. And we if we mimic the way the ancient ruminants, migrated across our grasslands and grazed and defecated and urinated and smashed the forage and moved on and then gave a lengthy rest period. If we can mimic that, um, and then we can get everything healthier, and just realizing that all of everything works together, and we can be a part of it, and we can't force it.
Have you done any soil testing?
I haven't. I know I need to, but just only so much time in a day, and I
It
figure
costs
right
money.
now, yeah,
Absolutely.
we're building a lot of fence right now and putting in a lot of water infrastructure, and I know that's just an excuse, but I figured my time is better spent doing that stuff. And if someone's listening and wants to come do soil tests and watch, a scientist, some down there, a grad student that wants to do some soil tests and watch levels increase over time, uh, come on out. But no, we haven't done it personally ourselves yet.
Yeah, and it's a challenge for me too. Yeah, there's a lot of information you get from a soil test, but what is it worth, and how am I going to pay for it?
Yeah.
Like, like you hear ads. I'm not too far away from irrigated corn and soybean country, so I'm always hearing ads for grid soil sampling and things like that. And then you go to the farm show and they talk about, oh, we'll come out and do these 40-acre grids and sample your soil and tell you what you need to apply. Like, you realize I'm not going to apply anything anyway, and your soil test probably isn't going to tell me what I want to, and you cost over $100 an acre to give me useless information. I think I'll pass. But then again, you know, I guess that's not really what we're talking about. We're more talking about like Haney's and PLFAs and some of the newer tests that are going to tell you about like the microbiome in your soil and the carbon fungal ratio and things like that.
I guess where I'm at right now, enough guys had done it, and including guys I knew that did. I didn't know they did it, but I knew them from working with them, or my brothers were friends, or we were fringe friends growing up. That once I got into regenerative, or kind of like really kind of found it on Facebook, kind of discovered the community on Facebook, and found out a few people that I knew did it, and they'd been doing it for 4, 5, 6 years already, and how well it was working for them. So I feel comfortable taking the leap without having to do soil tests, and I trusted what I was doing, and now I can see the results, on the ground with the grass and everything. And so I guess I'm comfortable moving forward without the soil tests. I know some people need to see the data in front of them, in numbers to have the faith to keep moving. But I guess I'm not that way.
Well, I think you're right too. With you see the results. Could you share what those are?
Yeah. So when we started doing this, 2019 was our first year, kind of doing some form of adaptive grazing.
Mhm.
I was starting out with zero residual on any of my pastures in 2019, so it was a challenge even starting then. But my grass lasted twice as long, even that first year, as what I was used to. I was used to running out of grass in my pastures in mid-July or early August, going out into my hay fields, hauling all the bales off, and then kicking my cows into there and letting them graze off that regrowth. And that would get me into end of October, and then I'd have to start feeding hay. And usually about October 25th, I was feeding hay all the way through May 1st. And so the this has allowed me to graze longer. Even right now, my cows are still out grazing, and we got about another 3 weeks of grazing left. And then we're going to go on full feed for January, February, and March. And then I have stockpiled grass ready to kick on in April or as early as weather will allow. So just doing the adaptive grazing has it's changed our land, just that rest period. And I think it was on your podcast last week. What was Sage was his name?
Yeah.
He talked about just 100% forage utilization, or just getting better, complete utilization of the forage you already have. That was my biggest increase that first year, and just that realization of just harvesting everything you already have more efficiently was the biggest jump. And now, there's an incremental jump every year as the health of the land increases.
How did you drive that forest harvest efficiency?
So my first year was a lot of trial and error, and I would do a lot of wagon wheel stuff around water tanks with polywire, and I had a couple miles of polywire out there it was kind of a disaster. But that winter, I got started watching more YouTube videos on paddock design, and someone that really helped me was Jim Garish, and what he said about.
I thought you were going to say when you said wagon wheel. I was like, oh, yeah.
But I started doing strip grazing. Strip grazing away from water is probably how I fence 90% of my pastures in the summer, and that's putting the initial paddock just right around the water and letting them hammer that, and then I usually do once a day moves, once every day or two, but then opening up paddocks just away from the water, up to a half mile away. They'll trail back to the water, but
you don't run with the back fence.
So when they're grazing away, I allow about a week for them to graze away, about a week, and they really don't touch the stuff they already grazed, because they trampled it, manure, urine all over it, and so they leave it alone until that regrowth starts. And I've found that we have about 2 weeks usually in the summer before our regrowth starts. So as long as I have them off of there, within 2 weeks, and then put a back fence up, then I'm just fine. That first summer, I was trying to back fence everything. As soon as I moved them into a different paddock, back fence it. But I found that's probably a lot of unneeded work. Now, if you're in a higher rainfall environment and you got faster regrowth, or just if you're in a higher rainfall environment, you probably don't want cows trailing a half mile back to water. And even that, for me, I would like to reduce that down to a quarter mile at some point, but kind of making sure everything only has a half mile to water right now is kind of the goal I'm setting. And I still have some pastures I'm working on to achieve that.
Yeah, I'm probably going to misquote numbers, but when you go past a quarter of a mile to water, your grazing efficiency starts dropping off a little bit.
Yeah.
But it really falls off sharp at that half a mile point.
Yeah. And I've noticed that at the quarter mile mark, the ends of the paddocks, because I like doing about a quarter mile by mile long pastures. And that way, when you chunk them up, you can, the polywire. So I'll do a better job explaining it. So a mile long, the perimeter fence is single strand, high tensile. And then you can set the water right in the middle. And then with polywire, set up your paddocks and then move away from the water. That's kind of how most of my pastures are set up. And I've noticed as you get towards that half mile mark, towards the end of that pasture, yeah, you tend to leave more, but it looks better from the road then.
Well, and then it won't look really good. Then it won't look good at all from the road for about 2 weeks. And then when it starts to grow again, it'll look like the best pasture on the ranch from the road.
Yep, exactly.
Can we talk about what you mean by 100% harvest efficiency? Because I think sometimes when I meet with different types of, ranchers. They don't really understand what that means, and I have to explain it to them. So like when I get into it, I like to talk about there's harvest efficiency, there's litter, and then there's residual, right? And so how do you get into calculating like that 100% what your utilization is going to be?
Well, I think that's kind of a little bit of a dance you kind of do from year to
Yeah.
year. Um, this year, I of the stuff I grazed, I probably took more than I should, but we were in a drought, and I was trying to lengthen my recovery times on the stuff I wasn't grazing, and we weren't getting any rain either, so it wasn't like I was damaging the regrowth. The plants are pretty much dormant, so I took a little bit more. And 100% harvest efficiency is probably how I shouldn't have worded it, because you're never going to get 100%. You're going to trample some, and you're gonna graze some. But I would just say 100% forage utilization as far as either being eaten or trampled, and then you're never going to, unless you go hundreds of thousands of pounds per acre, probably not going to get it completely flat. But um, yeah, I would say majority of it trampled, eaten. You don't have it grazed down to nothing one spot, and then 10 feet over you still have grass a foot high. Everything's grazed evenly, even manure distribution, even urine distribution, and it just looks uniform when you look out there.
There was a feedlot analogy that somebody posed to me about this. Like they came out and rode around, they saw, my strip grazing operation, and he thought about it and he thought about it and he said, I understand what you're doing. You're like that badass pen rider I used to have down that feedlot I used to own that knew exactly how much to put in the bunk to where those cows would leave one kernel of corn in that bunk overnight.
Yeah, that's kind of accurate.
There's something there if something wanted to eat it, but everything got enough to eat and they didn't want to have that. They didn't need to take that last bite out.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm about to move pastures where my cows are now. Move them down into some lower ground. It's actually like 45 degrees here today. It's beautiful, and we got some weather coming in, so I'm gonna move them down into some lower ground, and where I'm gonna feed them for most of the winter too. There's still some grazing there left, but there is a section line right next to this pasture that they're in, and I got them just hungry enough where I just fenced off that section line and turned them in there for the day, and they are hammering it. And there's a fine line between getting them hungry enough where they're going to tear down the fence, and hungry enough where they're going to be standing at the gate waiting for you.
When they've been standing at the gate for about 5 minutes waiting for you, and none of them have tried to get on their knees and graze
Yep.
under the hot wire, I think you did a
Yep.
good job. But when you go out there 2 hours before move time and they're all lined up grazing underneath the hot wire,
Yep. Yeah,
maybe
you
you
can
should
run
have
into
given them a little bit more.
that. Yeah. Yeah, and it's a that's the biggest thing is it's fun to learn and mess up, and you can always adjust tomorrow. That's the best thing about using polywire is if you messed up today and didn't give them enough, you can redo it tomorrow and do a little bit better. And if you messed up real bad, you'll make a note and try to fix that spot or graze a little lighter next year. It just gives you so much flexibility.
And I think that's something that we can spend a little bit of time talking about is when you are strip grazing and you're moving your cattle daily or, multiple times a day, like some of our friends do, you're observing how you're getting that many more opportunities to observe animal behavior and animal performance. You're looking at, gut feel. How full is the rumen? How content is this animal? If you go out there and it's time to move fences and your cows are just kind of milling around, they're not real excited. Well, they're probably full, they're probably content, and they know why you're there, but they're not super, super hungry and they don't need to go rush and get and go fight and hustle to get the best stuff that's in that next paddock you're going to give them.
Hmm.
On the other side of the coin, though, you know, it doesn't matter how careful you are, they will eventually get trained if you're doing it at the same time of day or if you come out in the same vehicle around the same time every day. They know what that means and they know we're going to go get fresh grass about this time of day. So you may have to take some of that animal behavior with a grain of salt, but you can always tell if that animal is content. You can always tell if her rumen's full. And if she's content and her rumen's full, at move time, you probably gave them enough groceries.
Yeah. Yep, for sure. And I've just found even doing this, you're handling the cattle more. So you would think growing up or ranch, just being a rancher in general, I think we all think we're pretty savvy around cows. But I've found my stockmanship has improved so much over the last 2 years, just from being out there and, like you said, observing cow behavior and um, understanding why they do what they do. Because you're out there so long, you kind of have a chance just to, sit off and watch one walk around or do what you do. When before you're kind of out there in a hurry, you got multiple groups to check water, check salt and mineral, dump a protein tub out the back, nothing's out, get out of there. But when they're all close to you and in a close proximity, you can observe them so much better and
Like 60 of them in 2 acres. I mean,
yeah.
they're right there.
Yeah.
You don't have to go very far to find all of them.
Yeah, and it's wild to see them eat plants you didn't think they would eat. Like I don't know how many videos I took this summer. We were so dry, and so the only green things out there were the weeds and the goldenrod, uh, Canada thistle, and everything that everyone wants to get rid of. Well, the cows would go for that stuff first because that was the only green stuff, and I wasn't supplementing any protein, and that they went for that stuff first, and they came through the summer pretty good.
Cows eat weeds. Like, and that's usually the first thing that they'll go look for in a pasture is weeds. Like, they'll walk by big blue stem, they'll walk by little blue stem, karama grass, buffalo grass to go find, that yellow clover or the white clover. Sometimes they walk by it to go eat thistles. I've seen them run into a new paddock and go eat yucca plants. Like,
Just the flowers or the actual green part of the plant too?
rip up the base of the plant. Okay,
Oh
like
wow, that's
they'll
awesome.
rip the base out and eat the base of the leaves. Well, they won't eat it. They'll sit there and they'll chew it up and they'll have it sticking out of their mouth. And once they get all the juices and the goo out of it they want, they just spit it out. But you're talking about the seed pods out of the yucca, like the flower pods,
Hmm.
like those yellow blooms. I I got to try to get to some of those next spring before my cows do, and see if I can't like determine what it is in there that the cows are really really after, because I'm sure you've seen it. Like, they will run over each other, they will fight each other to get those yucca flowers,
Yeah,
and it's kind of cool to see a cow run up to one of those and just wrap her tongue around that thing and jerk her neck straight up and peel 6 of those things right into her mouth, and then she goes to the next one 3 feet away and does the same thing.
yeah, yeah. Stuff like that's so cool because we just, I don't know, just with the conventional or traditional mindset, you just think of cows only eating grass, and they'll eat a whole hell of a lot more than that if you can graze them right and treat them the correct way.
Willow trees. I have several of these cows that I have caught like the first day or two in a paddock. Like, okay, we're talking like 165 cows in this herd right now in a 150-acre paddock. Like, they're not starving, trust me. But when
Yeah,
when the second day in there, when there's still green grass down the bottoms, when they're going and eating willow trees, it's not because there's nothing else to eat. It's because they want to eat that willow tree. But why? I wish I
yeah,
knew why.
yeah. There's something in there they want some micronutrient or something they're craving.
And I'll say this, like, the conventional black commercial cattle or red commercial cattle, not going to name any breeds, don't want to make any breed associations upset with me this week, not like I haven't done that before anyway. The English and continental breeds, they don't they don't go after that stuff as much as my Corrientes and Corriente cross cattle do. The Corrientes and Corriente cross cattle are way more adventuresome in their diet. And I don't know if that's because gut microbiome or generations of epigenetics and the commercial cows being, held up with high energy feeds and corn. I don't know. What do
Yeah,
you,
I'd imagine that you're probably right about that. That it's probably epigenetics to a certain extent.
you know, there's 400 years of adaptation in a dry environment where maybe some years all they had to eat was sticks and rocks. Well, it is kind of neat because they're controlling some of those willow trees in places that I can't really get it. Willow trees are kind of impossible to control. The only really way to control a willow tree is to get a beaver. But we can talk about those later.
I'll talk about beavers.
Okay, well, let's talk about beaver. Do you have any?
Yeah, we have a few. I'd like to have more, but beavers are a controversial topic too. And I understand people that don't like them, but
I don't think they're very controversial at all. I think they're awesome, and I think people that don't like them just need to change their minds. Now, that being said,
I agree with you.
my buddy Kevin owns a resort lake, and there's several series of ponds and a big lake, and they're kind of an issue for him. They can
Hmm.
cause kind of an issue for him. And my challenge would be to the state governments and wildlife agencies. You know, I think most of us are starting to recognize the benefits of beaver. Like, instead of encouraging people to trap them, why don't we build a network of landowners that are willing to host them and then apply some public money to relocating them to where they are desired or where they would be welcome.
I think the biggest benefit would be obviously out here in the West where it's drier. And especially you get into the mountains out in California and Oregon where they've had Montana where they've had all these bad fires. Every creek drainage that there was used to be a series of beaver dams. And around those beaver dams were riparian areas with lush green grass. And you think of August and September right now where there's no beavers anymore. Those creek beds are just dry and bear nothing in them. If we still had beavers out there and there were green plants in every creek bed, we'd probably not have so many problems with fires.
I 100%, 100%. I would even go farther than that and say where I am here in the Red Hills, anything that's down in the bottom of a draw or near a river or a creek that's currently being farmed, that all used to be underwater because it was dammed up by beavers.
Yeah,
And I bet you'd say the same thing up there in North Dakota.
yeah, yeah, for sure. So how do we go about bringing the beaver back and telling those farmers they can't farm $20,000 an acre farmland?
Well, that's probably that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah,
But it is a bigger issue, water rights, especially in the West and the arid states. I'm east of the 100th meridian, but not by very much. Like, I think I'm about 98, 98 and a bunch of change, and so it's close. You get west of that 100th, and water is so much more important, so much harder to come by, and not having beaver up in the mountains, not having beaver on the arid plains, there where you are in North Dakota and South Dakota and Western Nebraska and Western Kansas, not having beaver there, I, I, let's back up. I struggle to imagine what that vast landscape would be like if it still had beavers. Like, it's hard for me to wrap my head around, like, how much water should be on my ranch because of where beaver ponds are and where I think they have been in the past.
yeah, and I'm kind of stuck in a place where I'm surrounded by neighbors that hate them. I have a neighbor, and he's a good neighbor too, a real good guy. But he's got a motto, and he says it in every conversation. He just has a hatred for beavers. The only good beaver is a dead beaver. He'll say that every conversation you have with him, and and he owns quite a bit of river bottom that borders us, and yeah, he'll walk that river 10 times a year shooting beavers and cleaning out beaver dams and just hates them. So it's tough. Like, I have the opinion that I do, and I'd love to have beavers up and down, but my neighbors are trying to kill them. And then also, I have another neighbor that hires a government trapper to come out here and trap them. So the government is subsidizing, still subsidizing, killing beavers. And
Government still subsidizes
yeah,
planting eastern red cedar trees, and then like they'll give the next landowner money to burn them down.
yeah, and so it's a challenge, and there's just so many things about the agriculture mindset that needs to change. It's once you start realizing it, you realize how many things are just aren't quite right.
Do you think so much needs to change because we've been trapped in a culture that doesn't allow for challenging questions? Like for a long time, anytime you want to, anytime you challenge any part of the traditional production commodity system, whether we're talking about corn, soybeans, cotton, beef, chicken, or pork, you're basically told to shut up, sit down, get in line because we have to feed the world, right?
Yeah,
And that narrative is failing, and I think people are really starting to ask the right questions.
I think it comes down to almost like a moral question. Like back when I was doing things more conventionally, I knew I was degrading the land. I didn't realize as to what degree I was doing it, but I recognized that I was degrading the land, and I had the attitude, well, better me than the next guy. The next guy is going to do the same thing, and I guess I feel I have the right to degrade this land. And I don't know if that's the mindset
Well, if
everyone
you
has.
don't take it, somebody else will.
Yeah, exactly. But I knew deep down that I wasn't doing things right, and it like the same thing kind of applies with the beaver. Um, like you know deep down when you're doing stuff that isn't right with nature. Like it doesn't feel good spraying, to me doesn't feel good spraying pesticides, even though I have a business doing that, which is very ironic that I came to this mindset with a pesticide spraying business. But
I was going to ask about that.
no, but it's a necessary evil right now. But no, just doing things right by nature and having a thriving ecosystem that a beaver is a part of, and just like nourishing or nurturing your landscape or your resources to try to create the best ecosystem you have, instead of just looking at ranching like an extractive process, or I'm going to extract this much out of this land this year, instead of just seeing what you can get by just to see what you can get by working with nature instead of always trying to force nature. And the argument is there's no way that can be profitable, but there's people that have came before us, and probably you currently are. It can work, it can be profitable, and you don't always have to go through the government subsidies and do what everyone else is doing to be profitable.
It's worked in every environment that it's been tried in, and it has failed in every environment that it has been tried in. And the reason that people fail at regenerative agriculture is usually because they quit too early. They give up because it's not always easy. It's not always easy. We're much more dependent on Mother Nature than we are. We're dependent on Mother Nature for everything. By being able to go down to the co-op and spend money and get an input, or go flip a switch and make it rain because we have a center pivot or side rolls or whatever. I forgot what I was going to say. But we're not looking for that input. We have to deal with a lower energy budget, and we can't just go get that input. So there's going to be years that, you're going to have a crash, and it might hurt more, but your successes are going to feel so much sweeter because it was all yours. And you don't have to share that credit with the fertilizer salesman with this, or the seed salesman with his numerical variety, right?
Yeah. So yeah. Off that, one of the challenges I've had with cover crops is I don't use fertilizer. So back in 2017, or I was talking about having my hay operation that I'd sell hay. So I realized, obviously I'd been removing all that stuff over all those years, all those nutrients. It was like, okay, well, I got to add this shit back on. So in 2017, I spent $50,000 on fertilizer to fertilize those hay fields. And we had a drought, and when you broadcast fertilizer and you have a drought, that stuff doesn't just goes right back up into the air. So I may as well lit about 50 grand on fire. And so when that was the year I started farming too. And after that year, I said, I'm just not going to use fertilizer because, if it's not going to work, what's the point of making the gamble? And so I think part of the struggles I've had with cover crops is that I'm going into it with no inputs, and there's not a lot in the soil, and so it's a lot slower process. Which I kind of knew what was good that was going to happen also, but man, on dry years, stuff doesn't grow very well.
And it is dry. I think I know you're dealing with drought. You're probably a little bit deeper in a drought up there than we are here. We're just kind of where I'm at. We're basically on the edge. And I'm thinking about drought today because in February I've been invited to the Society for Range Management conference in Albuquerque in February to give a talk on drought management on a rancher panel. Actually, my friend Hobbs is going to be on that with me.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll mention some more about that in a future podcast and make sure I have that on social media. But you mentioned something about drought earlier, and you're talking about it's dry. Do you have a drought plan?
Yeah, I do. So kind of implementing my drought plan already. And actually, just from here on forward, I'm just gonna assume it's gonna be a drought every year. I think you kind of have to just assume next year is going to be a drought and approach it that way. And so
that's kind of where I'm at. Like, we're getting ready to start grazing year 2022. I'm going to look at grazing year 2022 with the cow herd that I've got and say, I'm going to say that this is going to be a below normal year. Target 16, 18 inches of rainfall, get about 75 to 80% of my normal grass growth. And I'm going to budget to graze that. And for that to last the cows that I want to graze all the way to January 1st, 2023.
Yep. And I have, because our growing season, we have a really short growing season. We grow pretty much all of our tonnage between May 15th and July 1st. And so we have a really short, our growing season goes from about May 1st through, or I don't know. There's stuff growing on April 1st, but we really don't have active growing until mid-May. So our active growing season, mid-May through mid-July, and then our actual growing season goes to mid-October. And to be able to grow the amount of forage that I want to grow, I have found, especially where my soil health is at, is I have to stay off the new growth when it's actively growing like that. So I found it works best to go into stockpiled pastures until probably mid-June. So those are pastures that probably haven't been grazed in a year. And I try to give all my pastures at this point in soil health or our rainfall lately. I've just been planning for, you graze it once, you hammer it, and then it has a whole year to regrow, the whole growing season. And then maybe if I get regrowth, I can do a dormant season grazing on some pastures. But as far as growing season, one graze, and then the whole rest of the growing season, it has to regrow. So I guess that's my drought plan. Is I have probably 1,000 acres of pasture for in the spring that's going to have that full year recovery, and that I'm not worried about that early season rainfall to kind of get stuff going. And then hopefully in that time, the pastures that I have grazed this last year that I haven't stockpiled can get that growth during that period from May to July.
Okay. That's right now I'm rotating probably every 2 weeks. Stock density is fairly low. We're living on stockpiled warm season grass that's just drier than dry. The expected or the normal fall moisture has failed to materialize. So normally we've got some nice cool season grass everywhere. I don't have any. So
So,
I'm really
question
having
about
to hammer with alfalfa to keep protein levels up.
you're supplementing with some alfalfa.
Yeah.
Are you doing that in cubes or bales, or how are you doing that?
Bales. Bales were cheaper. Bales were cheaper by bales were about half the cost of cubes this year.
Yeah.
So,
Interesting.
yeah, we got guy I'm commingled my cows with. He got us a pretty good price on alfalfa. So
And do you go for like second, third cut, the fancy stuff, or just regular alfalfa is good enough? Do you, or do you have to make sure it's tested and it's at a certain protein level?
uh he had this tested and I think it was around 17-18%. So I'm not sure what cutting it is. He might have told me.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff usually doesn't matter a whole lot to me. Alfalfa, almost 20%. Good. I can grok
Yep.
that. But we've really had to step up. We're feeding about 5 pounds a day right now.
Do you when you'd usually get your fall or regular moisture, do you have cool season grasses that grow all winter long?
Oh yeah, yeah. Um, Other than for maybe 2 to 3 weeks when the soil temperature's too cold, I'll have good cool season grass growth almost all year. Like we're talking about the weather. I mean, it's 73 freaking degrees here and it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And we're sitting here doing this podcast. Not that I'm not enjoying doing it, but the
I
bad thing
understand.
is the wind tomorrow. The
Oh
wind
yeah.
tomorrow. Holy crow. I don't know if it's supposed to blow up there, but it's supposed to blow here at 60 plus miles an hour.
We're not gonna be that bad, but we're gonna by tomorrow night we're gonna be well below zero wind chill, so that'll be fun.
I don't know if I'd trade you. As dry as it is, tomorrow we're gonna have single digit humidity, temperature
Oh
mid
man.
70s, and 60-mile-an-hour wind.
So down there is right now your biggest fire season over the winter in this kind of dormant period.
I would say yes. I would say yes. And usually we don't get this kind of ugly fire danger until much later in the winter and almost into spring. Like for this to be happening in December is not normal.
Yeah, I never really thought about that about the Southern Plains until I started doing some trucking down there. We're kind of lucky. We don't get a whole lot of snow, but we usually at least get enough that we don't have any fire danger in the winter. But that gets to be a long time for you guys where everything is brown and dry if you guys don't get those rains. Because the snow, as long as it's cold, it tends to stick around at
Right.
least.
And if you can
We're
get
usually
the
quite
air
cold.
temperature, if we can get the air temperature down like under 50 degrees, that really, really helps a lot. But once your air temperature is over 50, and your humidity single digits, it could be rough. It could be rough days. But when that temperature's over 80 and your single digits and your humidity, any anything hot is going to start a fire that will rapidly establish and be very, very difficult to control. Throw in 60-mile-an-hour winds, and I don't know what I'm going to do. Turn on the fire radio and hide in the basement so I don't have to listen to the wind and wait for the page.
Oh, yeah, those windy days are the worst. I can deal with cold and heat, but man, when it's windy, it's miserable to do anything.
it it's just the noise. You just can't get away from the noise, and it's so much extra work to even just try to stand up and move around. Everything you're doing is fighting you. Every Nothing wants to go right. But usually when the wind's blowing that bad, the cows just want to go. They just want to go stand in a canyon and be out of it. They don't want to get up and travel and be out in it.
Yeah, another grazing question for you. So, usually when you're winter grazing, you said you get some regrowth. So, do you try to go over all your pasture once in the winter and kind of do a dormant season graze on everything, or kind of what's your winter grazing strategy?
I'm on pace to go around twice this year, in this dormant season, and I'm starting to slow that down. As we get further and further away from a rain, I'm starting to slow that down so I get more days of rest in front of me. And I might even have to step up, feeding a little bit more alfalfa, go to, feeding 2 days in a row, then skip a day, then a day, then skip, then two, just to get some more poundage in them so they can utilize the stockpile that I've got. Because I was really, really counting on having at least some cool season growth, but it's been so freaking dry. There's nothing. I mean, I still have some in front of me that we're living off of from October, November moisture, but it's going to be slim pickings after about 1st January.
Do you have a strategy where you feed your alfalfa bales, like out on pasture when you're supplementing protein?
I'm trying all different stuff. So I've got a bunch of areas where the soil is really thin and really poor, right on top of a gypsum layer. Like, okay, yeah, come out, soil health guru, and tell me how to graze this gypsum rock better to make it grow grass. Like, the only thing I'm going to do is be able to add organic matter in there, chip it up, stir it up, add urine.
So, Savory would have told you to put a temporary fence around and lock the cows on there for at night.
Yeah, I'm sure somebody would tell me to do that, but it gets back to a labor thing, right?
Yeah, for sure.
We talked about that earlier, that it's so much less labor to put them all in one herd and move them every day. I wish I could practice what I preached on that. The way my ranch is broken up, I've got highways and county roads running through the thing. So I've got 3 big pieces and then another 250-acre pasture off by itself, separated by roads. And yeah, I know plenty of guys move up and down roads all the time. It's a blacktop highway with literally 200 trucks going down it every day. Okay. Yeah, I could move across it. I could move down it. We got to stop traffic. I got to have a bunch of extra riders and a sheriff escort to be safe because there's so much truck traffic on the road. Can it be done? Yes. Is it a practical thing? Not really. So I basically run the ranch as 3 ranches that just kind of happen to be adjacent to each other. So I generally have at least 3 cow herds. I've had as many as 5 different cow herds on the ranch at the same time, being managed differently. The year I had five herds, that was 2020. I had a young lady named Megan working for me, and 2 of those herds we strip grazed, and then one of them moved then 2 of them moved like every other day, just about. Another one moved about every week or so. So I don't always practice what I preach about having one herd and about having things simple. But, I also live 10 miles away. And yeah, it'd be great to be able to go out some nights and, tease them with a little feed, get them onto one of those areas, lock them up behind poly wire, then go home, be able to come back out there first thing in the morning, take that poly wire up and let them go. If I had one herd of cows, I could probably do some more stuff like that.
Yeah.
Where if, work was a little bit closer. So, it comes back to that labor question. And, we talk about, we kind of open up by talking a little bit about mental health. And we both grew up in ranching, right? The mindset is you get up when the sun comes up, and then you don't go to the house till the sun goes down. And if you can still stand, you didn't work hard enough. If your hands aren't bleeding, you're not working. If you're not working 6.5 days a week, you're not working hard enough. If you're not making enough money, just go work harder. That'll fix it, right? That's the mindset. We've got to blend that in agriculture with the 9-to-5 mindset. Farming ranch is not a 9-to-5 job, never has been, never will be, unless you're maybe a contract chicken grower or contract hog grower and you clock in and clock out every day and you work for Tyson. That's what we're talking about. Like in our line of work, it's never 9-to-5.
Yeah, and that's a big leap I've had to make is, especially after I got into some debt, is you just want to work nonstop to get yourself out of it. And I mean, in 2020 we started a meat business and still doing the oil field thing and then ranching. Something had to give, and I was trying to do some custom farming too, and you just kind of run yourself into the ground. I saw a picture of myself yesterday that I took in April 2020 when I was seeding, and I just looked absolutely miserable. And kind of realized after 2020 that this isn't the way we want to live our lives, and some things had to change. And so that needs to be part of our context, or what we want to work towards is we want to still have free time. We want to be able to go to the lake on the weekend or have fun with friends. And so one of the steps we did, we actually sold off all of our haying equipment here this last year to, first of all, that was one of the areas we were losing money in, was putting up hay.
How bad did your dad freak out when you sold the hay equipment?
Well, my dad actually passed in 2015.
I'm sorry.
But oh no big deal. But he was pretty good. I think when I left and said I wasn't gonna come back, I think he was pretty hurt by that. And when I came back, he really didn't push me or nudge me in any direction. I think he was just so happy that I came back that he's like, you can do whatever ever you want. So I sold a couple of his tractors that he told me to never sell. And that's an emotional deal. You think they're just chunks of iron, but they've been around the place since, longer than you, or long, ever since you can remember. And selling
every
that stuff,
piece of iron on the ranch has an emotional, sentimental story attached to it.
Yeah, and it's stupid when you really think about it, but hey, they're genuine emotions. And so that he would have I think he would have supported the decision just because of the situation, but it was still difficult because of those reasons of, he told me not to sell those tractors, but he can't buy them back from me, so.
Well, the way the price of things on the used market right now, God, there's some iron that was good investments. Like I was talking to a friend yesterday. He saw a 4840 John Deere tractor with like 12,000 hours on it sell for $75,000. Like, I think that's about 3 times what it cost when it was new.
Yeah, I wish I would have did that well on my stuff. I didn't. I ended up not doing that great, but it ended up being a chunk of money that I able to. Also with the NRCS equip, in addition to the cover crops I'm putting in, I'm got signed up to do a bunch of water infrastructure, and to do that, you have to pay for it first, and then they reimburse you. So you need I put in a mile long stretch of pipeline buried at 6 feet deep, and did a road bore and put in a couple tanks. That was just one project I did, and I mean, by the time it was done, that was over $40,000. And so I kind of helped me bankroll some water infrastructure, and so that I can graze some of those hay fields I was haying, and so it'll pay for itself in the long run. But it was a tough thing to do, but I think it was necessary.
You've got to trench in 6 feet.
Yep, yeah. If we don't trench in 6 feet, it freezes.
We get away with like 2 feet here. What does it cost? What does it cost per foot to trench 6 feet?
I think it's going rate's about $230 a foot.
Well, that's not bad.
No, it's not. It's not too terrible.
I think it's about $1 a foot here to put one in. So I thought it'd be a lot more than that, since you got to go so much deeper.
Yeah, but a lot of the water infrastructure I put up this summer is I put up a bunch of above ground line for just summer pasture. In winter pasture, I found you kind of only need one watering point, like per piece of ground, or because cows can trail back in the winter and they're not going to do a whole lot of damage.
And I think they'll go a lot farther in the winter than they're
Mhm.
willing to go in the summer.
And then sometimes there's snow on the ground, and they'll supplement. I mean, right now we got a little bit of snow, and they're barely going through any water. I have 150 cows, and they're going through under 1,000 gallons of water a day right now. They're just not going through much. So it's amazing in the winter, just their water needs. And so I started laying out a bunch of above ground line, and obviously I have to have it drained and everything unhooked before about mid-October, but that works really well too. And I don't know why more people don't do that. It's And then if you want to move it, you can just hook a chain to it and drag it behind the four-wheeler to move, that black pipe. And it's pretty tough. So
How big, what diameter pipe was that?
that was inch and a quarter. And
It's the same stuff I was using. How did you get around that pipe picking up a lot of heat in the summer? Were you just using a short run?
I didn't. That was one thing I was concerned about, because by the time that water gets to the tank, and we were hot this summer, we had a lot of days over 100 degrees. That water was pretty hot by the time it got to the tank. I mean, luckily the cows drank it, and they still did all right. I know Clay Connery's talked about this on his podcast, because he was worried about that too, and I can't remember who he talked about, but he said that we need to quit anthropomorphs. We need to quit treating thinking of cattle like they're people. Like if it's too hard for us, yeah. Sorry, and they don't have the same feelings as us, so maybe they don't think that water's hot. But I don't know how they couldn't think it's hot. But some people say that they've seen it so hot where the cows won't drink it. I never saw that. They were still drinking it pretty good for me this summer. I don't know. Have you had any experience with that?
I didn't. I only set up my portable water system a couple times this year, and I only used one stick of pipe, which is 500 foot for me. And that was just to do some mineral water, to get some mineral water out for my cows that Steve Campbell talks about, that I learned about in an episode on Clay Connery's podcast. This Clay Connery guy, he's got this other podcast that's,
sorry for mentioning him.
Yeah, it's kind of okay. People might want to go check it out. It's called Working Cows. He's got a few episodes. He does an okay job. But anyway, it was Working Cows 160. Steve Campbell was talking about mineral water. Yep. And strangely enough, like, I listened to that episode while I'm out there looking at these cows, and I go, I see that. I see that cadmium. I can see that. So I got my Tomcat water system set up, got things moved around. Got some C90, like the salt's the easy part to find. The second water tank, the pump, that's easy to find. The hardest part about setting up that whole mineral water gag is finding a freaking burlap sack to use as a tea bag.
Yeah.
Like, man, I'd like to never find a burlap sack. I thought I asked everybody in the world. And then I was sitting there and we're down to maybe getting, like one of those new style, really plastic feed bags and just poking a whole bunch of holes in it and trying that as a tea bag. I'm like, I'll just call my buddy Nate, who runs the ranch north of me. Like, Nate and I've taken in Nate's cattle for 13 years. Our fathers ran cattle together out here in the Red Hills. We've met. So I called Nate. It's like, hey, I need a favor. He's like, what's up, buddy? I said, I need a burlap sack. You know where I can get one? He's like, yeah, I got one right here. I can run it over. I'm like, oh, no shit. I've been looking for a burlap sack for 3 days. I've called everybody. Nobody had one. You've got and he had a stack of them in his shop. So
how did that work out with you putting that tea bag of salt in? So you had 2 tanks, right?
Okay. So
and then one you put the tea bag in, or did you alternate days?
Okay. So I have my 16-foot fiberglass tank that's gravity fed for my solar system, with 18,000 gallons of storage. So that's up on top of the hill. I drug my Tomcat pump trailer out, one piece of pipe, and my 250 gallon portable pond. Okay. So I had to build a little stand for the pump for the Tomcat. I just threw it in the bottom of the stock tank, turned it on, connected it to the portable pond, filled it up. Okay. Got water down here. I put 100 pounds of salt in that tea bag and dropped it in there and came back in 2 hours and it was gone.
Wow.
The cows had drank it all. I put another 100 pounds of salt in the bag and left, came back in the morning and it was gone.
Do you have free choice salt out there already?
Yeah. When I started feeding the C90 back in June, I started putting out free choice, and then we did the mineral water, and we did it we only did it twice. Okay. I only had it out for 2 days, but in those 2 days, I mean, it was 350, maybe 400 pounds of salt that went through that mineral water. And it was immediate. Like, it was immediate, and not every animal turned around. And I'm not saying that it's a miracle fix all, but I had several cows that had pink eye pretty bad. I had a couple cows that were suffered from some feet issues. I had one that the day before I put the mineral water out, like, I'd been watching this cow and she'd kind of been going downhill for a while. I was gone for a couple days, came back, looked at her, was like, oh man, she looks freaking horrible. Like, she looked bad enough I would have shot her if she didn't have a calf, but she was nursing a freaking calf, blind in one eye, losing it in the other, and probably didn't weigh 500 pounds. But she was still nursing a calf. So mineral water twice. That cow, I can still find her. She still looks like crap, but she's alive, and her eyes are clear. Her feet are fine. So the 2 rounds of mineral water we did, after that, like prior to that, we're really like pink eye problems were on the rise. Like, we're heading towards a pink eye wreck. Mineral water stopped it dead in its tracks. We've also been feeding Free Choice C90 ever since then. They've always had it available. So was it the mineral water with, you know, the C90 mineral water, or was it the C90? I don't know, but I think that mineral water has so much more of an effect. Like, it's so much more bioavailable than when they lick the salt and then it has to dissolve in their room. And I think it's just a shot direct into the metabolism when they drink that mineral water.
Yeah, that makes sense. I started using that. I started using Independent Salt Company stuff. Is that similar? They're in Kannapolis.
Yeah, Kansas Independent Salt.
Yep. And I started using that this summer, and it worked great. It's amazing. I just have it Free Choice. I haven't done the mineral water thing yet, but it's definitely something I'm going to try. Like you said, if you notice that your cows are noticeably lacking.
The important thing with that mineral water deal is, like, the undissolved solids that are in the bottom of your tea bag and that are in the bottom of your tank. Don't put those anywhere where you ever want anything to grow.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so that's the stuff. Yeah, take that stuff out and dump it where you're doing your weed spraying on lease roads and around tank batteries. Because it could be some ugly stuff. I mean, I don't know what it is.
Makes sense.
But if it's not going to get dissolved in water, if it comes out of the sea water, or ancient sequestered salt like Kansas Independent, and it doesn't dissolve back into water, it's not bioavailable. I mean, it's bad.
Yeah. That makes sense. But I've been really impressed with that stuff. You can really tell when you go from like a green pasture, where obviously they're getting a lot of their minerals and everything they need from the grass. And then as the summer moves along and the grass kind of cures out, and they'll start hammering that more and more because they're able to get less and less minerals out of the grass. And I was really impressed this summer because, man, when it was real dry there for about a month and a half, and I didn't have any protein and everything was brown, and all they were getting was that salt, and they held together great. And I had a couple cows that had foot rot that I had to shoot with some Draxin, but I never had any pink eye, and a lot of people up here had pink eye issues. And I don't know. I think that stuff works really great in conjunction with the type of grazing we do.
See, I think out of my calves, only one of mine we had to dart, and we only darted one of my cows. She had foot rot, like, bad. And kind of funny is, all last year we were strip grazing, like, kind of worked this cow into almost a pet. Like, she would come up, let me rub on her, she'd eat cake out of my hand. Well, she gets foot rot, and I got to shoot her with a dart full of Draxin one time, and now she won't ever come near me again. It's like, how does she even know that was me? I was in the gator, like, almost 100 feet away. Like, how does she know that was me?
And you're just trying to help her.
Yeah, I was just trying to
Ungrateful.
help. Yeah, just come over here. I just want to let you eat this candy out of my hand. Oh, yeah. Of the calves, we only had to dart one calf, and the criteria was, we're watching them. Like I said, we both thought we were kind of headed towards a wreck because I think we had to dart 4 or 5 of my partner's calves. Had several of his cows we were really keeping an eye on, and we wanted to keep the antibiotics out of them, so we let them get one eye. But when they got the second bad eye, that's when you get a dart.
Mhm.
And we did the same for the cows too. So just apply that blanket policy on the whole herd because, like I talk about all the time, we're trying to shift everything to low input, low maintenance, low requirement, all as much of an all natural cow herd as we can. So, but the mineral water, it had to have helped. Like
Yeah.
ever since we put that out there, the pink eye problems cleared up, the feet cleared up. Some of the structural issues that Steve Campbell talks about on that Working Cows 160 that look like a cadmium uh, toxicity problem.
And
I could
that's where
see
they're like
that.
kind of humped up in the back.
Yeah, humped up in the back with like the spine is ridged and humped a little bit
Okay.
with a pronounced dip before the tail head.
Okay.
Okay, that's kind of what I was hearing, and I saw a lot of that. And after we did the mineral water twice and have been feeding free choice salts, ancient sequestered C9 to your Kansas Independent or Redmond's conditioner. I think that's what Steve Campbell recommends. I'm not going to argue with him. Um, Having that out there, I think, has corrected a lot of those mineral imbalances and that cadmium toxicity. And he makes a point about like a lot of these cow minerals that we've been getting, we didn't know we were getting from China. And where's their quality control? You know, and does a cow really need that? Does a cow really need all those fancy supplements? Do they
Yeah,
really
yeah.
need that fancy mineral package?
Yeah,
I,
I did a TikTok video kind of on this and on inputs, and it's just a mindset where people think the more money they spend on their cows, the more vaccinations they put into them, the more wormer they put into them, the more protein tubs they buy, the better their cows are. And I guess I used to kind of have that mindset too, but when you really look at it, the return on an investment just isn't there. It's kind of just those companies preying on ignorance a little bit.
well, I think some of the like a 7-way BRD vaccine, blackleg, pastorella, some of those things I think are necessary.
Yeah, yep, for sure.
But there's a lot of them that are not. And I think that a lot of vaccines and a lot of health programs and veterinary protocols that producers use on their cow herds like are self-fulfilling prophecies almost. You know, i- if we didn't use them, we wouldn't have to use them. But since they exist and we've been using them, they're always going to need to be used. Like the does that kind of make sense to you?
Yeah. If you do always what you've always done, you're always gonna have what you've always have. And yeah, if you use Poron, you're always gonna have to use it. You're never gonna be able to work your way away from it. And same goes. I think the two things that bother me most are protein tubs and Poron, both of which I think about 95% of the time they aren't needed. You see a lot of people that'll just dump protein tubs out on overgrazed pasture. Well, that pasture, those cows probably don't need any protein. That's probably all they're getting is protein because they're nipping off that little regrowth. What they need is carbon. Like they need energy.
Hauls
And
old crappy dry bales.
yeah. And that's one thing that bothers me. And then just the way people relentlessly pour cows and think it's somehow working. And I don't know about your area, but it doesn't work at all up here. It doesn't work for lice. It doesn't work for flies. It'll work for 2 weeks, but everyone does it in the spring and fall just without asking any questions or even does this work or even asking the question, what damage are we doing to our land and to our ecosystem by adding what I believe is a pretty useless input. at least up here in northern climate, I know we have less problems with parasites and flies and stuff up here. But I those are two things that just kind of perplex me.
Okay. When I bought my cows in 2020, I am not doing any pour on. We're not worming them. If I think they need to be wormed, we're going to go out. We're going to look at the manure and do fecal egg counts. Then we lived through the blizzard of, the polar vortex bomb of February 2021. And as soon as it warmed up after that, I started noticing my cows had lice. And they weren't cleaning up into late April like I'd expect them to. The lice wasn't really spreading. We came through and I used some pour on. Forget the exact product that we used, but I made sure that it was one of those things that, was labeled safe for dung beetles. Because of course, dung beetles are a priority. And a few cows also had some ticks. And okay, I'm going to take some heat for that because of the way the winter was. I didn't plan things out that well. And when that polar vortex was coming in February, I pretty much stayed in the same paddock that I'd already been for maybe a little bit too long, but I still had grass down there and it had places for him to get out of the wind and the cold. It's a choice I made and I got to live with the consequences.
A question about, when they had lice, you were seeing like big rub patches on them?
Yeah, from the shoulders forward, like shoulders and neck, from the pole back. And we were seeing quite a few of them get ticks, like ear ticks.
Okay. And then when you poured, you saw that the lice kind of cleared up.
5 days.
5 days.
Yeah.
We were done rubbing. So that was in the winter of 2020. Was that last winter, you mean?
Yeah, that was 21.
Yep. Okay.
This year.
So what's your plan for this winter then?
Well, I'm on a different part of the ranch. We're going to keep rotating. I'm not going to stay anywhere more than a week. Keep supplementing with alfalfa. Just keep watching them. More than likely, we're probably going to want to go ahead and do a pour on just for lice and ticks again in the late spring before when we work calves.
So, like, what's your plan in the future? Are you going to eventually try to wean off of that, or is that just going to be part of something you have to do?
Something I'd like to get away from. So I don't have EIDs in all of my cows, but all of my calves, all of my yearlings, they all have an EID. So we're going to be keeping track of those as I grow all those heifers, the ones that got pour on, but didn't look like they needed all. The ones that look like they're fine with a hair, with not having any, lice or tick pressure. That's definitely, a plus in the book, right? The ones that have the shitty hair coat that are getting ate up with lice and ticks. I don't care how well they conform, to the box I'm looking for to put their body in. They're not, they're not disease, they're not tick, and they're not pest resistant enough to fit the program long term. That doesn't mean they're not going to stick around for a little while. Just for numbers, doesn't mean they're not going to stick around and be productive.
So those ones that are a little bit more resistant, are you pouring those as well, or are you leaving those, or are you pouring them and then just marking them that this cow isn't having the problem?
Oh no, I'll have to make that decision next spring. But
and I'm not saying like, everybody's situation is different, and I'm just saying up here we're in a cold, dry environment where we're at, and we don't have the parasite pressure that you guys down in the south, farther south do. So I'm not saying a blanket statement for everyone. I'm just saying, as far as my observations around here, I think there's a lot of unneeded pouring.
I think there's a lot of unneeded pouring around here too, and a lot of things that are unnecessary around here too. And that being said, I don't have the problems that somebody like somebody would have down on the Texas coast or down in Louisiana or down in Florida or anywhere else. We all have a different problem. We're all facing different challenges with climate, with forage, with the species mix of forage, and with the even with the pest load, the native pests that are going to affect our cattle, they're different everywhere. And in some areas, a dewormer product might work and it might not work. What works for me won't work for you, even though we're looking at what may seem to be a similar pest because of past overuse of that chemical in an area. Which, that's something else that just blows my mind. Like, oh, well, everything's resistant to this molecule now, so let's just make something even more toxic. Yeah, that's not going to work for very much longer.
No, it definitely isn't.
So I want to hear your thoughts on feedlots.
Okay, yeah.
Tell me what you think about feedlots.
Well, I don't want to piss them off too bad. They still got to buy my calves. I think where we're at right now, I think they're necessary. Just well, we're just not set up to do anything different. They're for that model to change. I don't know how it would even be possible at this point. Would it have to come from the government, like banning CAFOs, or?
Do you think it changes, or do you think that those customers just simply age out and aren't replaced?
Do you mean like people that want feedlot beef, or like corn-fed beef?
Yeah, and we don't have to restrict it to just feedlot or corn-fed beef, but like I've started to think lately, and I may have said this on the podcast, and forgive me if I repeat myself every week. I'm really starting to think that I repeat myself too much. Shit, I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, I never really gave my
thoughts.
So I think feedlots, like I said, they're necessary now, but they're just so inefficient and so reliant on fossil fuels that there's studies that say that there's a less environmental footprint than grass-fed beef, and that that just doesn't take into the entire carbon footprint that feedlots have. You have to use fossil fuels to seed that crop, harvest the crop, or seed the crop, fertilize the crop, spray the crop, harvest the crop, truck the crop to the feedlot, feed the crop, and then haul the manure back out onto some field, not the field that it came, or not the field where the crops came from, and then spread that out. It is just so reliant on fossil fuels. And so how much longer are we going to have cheap fuel? And I know people are bitching about high fuel prices right now, but this is nothing. Like, what happens if diesel's $20 a gallon? How are we going to feed the world then? Like, that's people's argument. Oh, if we don't have feedlots, how are we going to feed the world? Well, if diesel's $20 a gallon, how the hell are we going to feed the world?
I don't think it has to be $20 a gallon. So
no, yeah, you're right.
I remember what I was saying. So I've been thinking that it's regenerative agriculture. It's almost a hearts and minds game, right? It's hearts and minds. It's connecting people with their food. That's why a lot of us are successful in regenerative agriculture, because we're willing to be open and vulnerable, tell the story, the open, honest, naked truth of beef from calf to plate. The guys that are heavily invested in that feedlot CAFO production commodity system, they don't want you to see what goes on behind the curtain once that calf is weaned, right? They think that there's this magical process that you wean a 400-pound calf that somehow magically gets turned into box beef, and there's nothing evil or nothing environmentally destructive in between. Don't look at that. Don't film that. Don't show that anywhere, right? So that being said, circling back to what I was talking about earlier when I lost my train of thought, the people that are bought into that system, that are invested in that system, and that consume that product, that really enjoy that product, you're not going to take away much of that demand. You're not going to take away much of that desire. You'll convert somebody here or there, or maybe somebody will eat a little bit less, let's just call it CAFO product, and start eating more grass-fed, grass-finished product. That ratio is not going to change. Where we make where the regenerative agriculture is making huge strides is in new customers. And the customers that we're getting are the young ones. Okay. We're not getting the 60-year-old, we're not getting the 60-year-old city dweller that's, love to go down to Golden Corral every Sunday and have a steak. And they love the taste of that. That's fine. There's plenty of people in a world like that. We're getting the foodies. We're getting the people that are passionate about their health. We're getting the people that are passionate about, that care about the environment. We're getting the people that are just now starting to make money and spend their own money in the marketplace and determine through the power of their spending dollar, they're voting with their spending dollars. And that's what they're giving us market signals. It was just a couple of years ago that, excuse me, grass-fed beef was growing at 13% per year. I think this was 2019. I heard these numbers, fall of 2019. Grass-fed was growing at 13% a year. But regular beef demand, it was like 2.5 or 2.9%. 13% growth. I'll put that in perspective. That means the demand is going to double in something like 6 or 7 years. So we've got to double the grass-fed, grass-finished market in 5 years, 5 to 7 years. We've got to double it. And then double it again in the same interval in order to keep up with 13% growth. That's incredible.
Yeah, that sounds great. That paints a pretty
we aren't
future.
And we're not taking customers away from grain-fed CAFO beef. If we are, we're not taking enough for them to notice it. So I think, we're not going to convert very many of those people. They're going to age out. They're going to continue consuming that product until they die. And then they're just going to age out and they're not being replaced by another consumer of that product.
Why do you think in the agriculture community, there's a lot of people that get so passionate and fired up about feedlots, and they're people that aren't necessarily like directly involved, but they're like feedlot adjacent, like I am. Like I sell my calves to a feedlot in the fall, so it's like people like that are so passionate that no, this model is working. This is why we need to do this. Why is
they're invested in it and benefiting?
Why is the ag community like so? Why do they want to take up that fight? I don't understand why that's the hill they're willing to die on.
It doesn't make sense to me. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. It only makes sense really when you think about it in the context that they don't understand what's really going on behind the curtain. Like, they don't understand that, all these corn and soybean subsidies that get approved in the Farm Bill that that everybody's senator and representative loves to brag about how much they support farmers. All those crop subsidies, all those grain subsidies are a handout to the packers who are foreign owned. Like, when I see somebody willing to stand on a hill and die on a hill and defend feedlot beef. I mean, we talked about this a couple weeks ago with Philip Meese, Carnivore Bar. We basically feed these cattle to the point where we're giving them fatty liver disease. Like, we're feeding them to the point where they're basically getting diabetic and getting fatty liver disease, but we're doing them a favor because we kill them before they die from the disease that we give them because of the diet that we force them to eat. And these animals, we're feeding them a ration that's too hot, that's burning up their livers, that's burning up their lungs, that's making them sick. And in order to counteract that, while they're standing in these small pens, ankle deep in their own piss and shit, to keep them healthy, we're just going to mass feed antibiotics. Like, I haven't said this before on the podcast, and I'm not going to name any names. And I'm not even going to be very specific. But I was in a room with over 100 other people, and we listened to a feedlot vet that worked for a big name ranch tell us that his vet protocol had two different categories. Everything that came on the yard was either high risk or low risk. Okay. The high risk cattle coming off the truck got a shot of Jackson. The low risk cattle coming off the truck got a shot of Bay Trail 200. Like, and this is a ranch system that runs 100,000 a year. Now you gonna now sit there and tell me that nobody else does that they're the only ones that do that. That's horse shit. That's horse shit. That's protocol at every feedlot in the country.
Yeah, it's confusing. And why wouldn't they want? Okay, let's say we're not coming after necessarily how you feed your cattle, but maybe just the large operations. Why wouldn't we want more of those feeding operations if you're so passionate about it? Why aren't there? We need to get more farmer feeders again. That way, at least that system that brings in all this forage and all this feed from miles and miles around into these huge feedlots, we at least keep it a little bit local or go back to a more localized system where there's a lot more farmer feeders and they can get that manure back out into their land, and it's not just all these nutrients just come to this one central location, and then you have 100,000 cattle in a feedlot.
I'd love to see the return of the farmer feeder, where everybody up and down the Platte River Valley or the Arkansas River Valley or over the Ogallala Aquifer had 500 or 1,000 cows. Had a 500,000 cow feedlot, and they finished their own stock from shit they grew on their farm.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody had their own branded beef program. I'd love it, but I don't think that that's a realistic reality.
No. And if we could ever get back to that place, that's not a very big leap then to getting those cows out of the lot and then just grazing whatever forage is out on the fields, whether it's cover crops or grazing corn. But I think the first step needs to be probably getting back our farmer feeders. And I don't know how the hell we do that.
Well, how did we lose them? I don't know that, because I don't have much of a memory of a lot of quote farmer feeders around here. I kind of have maybe this highly idealistic thought in my head about what a farmer feeder should be. What does that mean to you?
Guess a farmer that grows crops and either also has a cow herd or grows crops and then uses some of that forage, whether it's grazing crop residue or has silage, and then buys yearlings to background them or to finish cattle, just on their operation.
But not somebody who's growing primarily a cash crop, somebody who's primarily growing a forage crops.
Yeah, but there'd be a way to blend the two systems by incorporating some cover crops and kind of having a diverse system, but a little bit like what Gabe Brown has, where he's got sells crops for commodities, but then incorporate cover crops and grazing crop residue. But there's so many guys now that are specialized either cattle or crops, and I mean they tore out the feed pens probably 15 years ago, and a lot of that infrastructure is gone. So it'd be a pretty tough transition back. But I mean, we got to do something sooner or later. What do you think the path forward is? What do you think happens? Do we just keep going like this?
There's so much there to unpack. So breaking up big feedlots, getting back to more of a small scale farmer feeder where putting the craft back into finishing beef. I mean, grass finishing beef is a craft. I have very little concept of that. I'll be the first to admit, don't ask me how I'm finishing animals on grass, because I haven't done one yet. I haven't peeled and eaten one that I've done yet. I'm still working on that, and hopefully by the time that I need to know, I'll know. But it's an art, and you take away the iPad, you take away, these fancy apps, you fire the nutritionalist. Okay. How do you know how you're feeding your cow?
Look at the manure pat. It's pretty easy.
You know, we gotta bring back some of these skills of just observation of the animal and how the animal's functioning. Because what science says is you feed this kind of animal this kind of diet and it's going to do this. Well, yeah, that works. But what else is happening in there? Like, are we giving them acido? They're getting lesions on their lungs. They're getting liver acidosis, fatty liver disease. Like, why is this happening? Why is this happening, nutritionalist? What what can we feed our cows to keep them healthier longer? No, it some of it is some of it came from the BSE scare. Like you can't it's under 26 months, right? Animals under 26 months don't have to be checked for BSE. Over 26 months, I think it costs like an extra $250 or $300 in processing because of the special handling, because of the BSE risk of an animal over 26. So we got to cram them into feedlots. We have to feed them all this super, super high energy feed and blow them up to 1,800 pounds before they're 26 months old or 28 months old. So they don't have to, take the BSE precautions. And I know you said something about this. We just said like 1,800 pounds. Like big cows, big framey cows, they're great for making the packer money. Great for making the packer money. Absolutely terrible for making the cattleman money. If the cattleman wants to make any money, small frame cows are where it's at.
Yeah, and I fell victim to that too. My cow herd is still too big. When I was in the conventional model, I was looking at EPDs and chasing weaning weights, and my cows, I run a Simmental Angus mix kind of right now, but I'm moving back towards Angus, more just straight Angus. But I mean, my cows right now are 14, 1,500 pounds, and they're too big. And they go through more feed. So this summer I had some custom grazers out here. I ran some yearlings that have a little bit of low line in them. They're like a quarter low line, and they were yearling heifers. And when I got them, they were only about 650 pounds. And when they left here, they were probably about 850 pounds. And just seeing how little forage those, like two of those yearling heifers ate less than one of my cows, and it definitely made me realize that just how much more these big cows eat. And so we've been this EPD model that's been pushed on us, that we need to chase these high milking cows, high weaning weight cows. That's comes from the packer down. They just want these big frames so they can hang. They can have 1,600 pound finished animals, 1,600 pound finished animals. And the argument is you get paid more for those. But what is your feed efficiency to get that cow up there? I mean, it's a lot. I have done a little bit of, I haven't done a lot of it, but I've been doing the grass finished beef thing for a couple of years. So I finished quite a few cattle on grass, and it's, you can do it, but it takes longer, and you need the right kind of feed, and it's a challenge. And it's a lot easier to get those cattle to finish when they're a little bit smaller frame. So, and the easiest cattle to get to finish, and which are the ones I sell, are your young open cows that are still healthy, and and especially if they're a little bit smaller in frame. You pull that calf on them, they come up open, and you pull that calf on them, and they even look at some green forage or some hay, and they balloon up, and they fatten right up. And those are mostly what I've been butchering and selling, and it's a great product. I mean, those cows can finish easy. They're fat, and I don't know why they're not a more desired product, honestly.
Because we've been we let somebody else do our marketing. That's why.
There's this stigma that needs to be this, 20-month-year-old steer for anything to taste good, where when in reality, animal that young, the only way to get marbling in is just to shove a whole bunch of feed to it. But these older cows, they have a lot more natural marbling, these fat deposits in their muscle that develop over the year that expand and contract, throughout the year depending on the forage available.
Yeah.
And they're
I,
used to putting on this weight, and it's
I want to eat her where she's
yeah,
this one. I call her Peaches. Peaches has a calf. Look at how fat she is.
yeah, and she'd be great eating.
What do you
It's
think Peaches weighs?
uh 850, 900.
I think she was around 850 last time we
Yeah,
weighed
those are.
anything back in September.
So what are your yearlings weigh, like 550, 600, or?
I'd have to go back and look. I think the yearling steer I kept over, he was around, I think he was around 550, and the heifers were around 400.
Interesting.
So they don't gain a whole lot over the first winter. But
No.
that steer that I kept, um, we tagged him. We got a weight on him May 7th, and we got a weight again on him on September 14th. And I wasn't fast enough to see the weight, but I did see it say average daily gain 2.8 pounds per day. So he put on a bunch of weight this year.
Yeah.
He's bigger and heavier than his mother. Like he's probably got 2 inches on his mom, and he's bigger around now.
So with these cows you bought, what is your plan as far as revenue for them? Are you gonna background the calves, or are you gonna what's your plan as far as marketing them?
Ooh, well, funny you should ask. I've been working on that. I haven't kept any of the steer. Well, I've kept a steer out of each calf crop just so I can watch how they grow. Kept all my heifers. Okay. And after we weaned the heifers for 45 days, after they've been separated for the cow 45 days, they came back. This year we hauled out to wheat pasture. Last year we did a fence line weaning. And I don't think I have to tell anybody about how bad you get your head torn off with half Coriander calves going to sale barn. And I don't want to tell anybody how bad I got my head torn off going to sale barn with these half Coriander calves. Didn't think I had a choice. I'm a little smarter now. So I want to be the seed stock guy. I want to be the guy that everybody within 200 miles drives by and goes, I want his cows because his cows live on sticks, rocks, and dirt, and they give me a beautiful calf every year. So my angle is more towards the seed stock business. I feel like if I've predicted this trend correctly, I'm far enough in front of it that by the time the rest of the world catches up, I'll have something that everybody else wants.
I think you might be right.
You know, make a small forage efficient animal that requires almost no inputs, that's, disease and pest resistant, that can live out here all year with minimum supplementation on salt, the pasture, and alfalfa. That's going to be worth something.
I think we're going to see a big shift as far as bulls go too, where people, instead of going through these big production sales, just buying them from people like you that have a good forage based operation. Because for a long time I was buying my bulls, over east around Bismarck, and they would be wintering them on silage, and that's not my environment. And I'd get them here, and they'd only last 2 years.
Right.
And so I've started keeping a few of my own. This is the first year I've left calves uncut, a few calves out of some of my smaller frame cows, and they had a small birth weight. And then found a couple guys around here that have pretty good forage based operation, and trying to get some of those genetics, because that's just the way of the future, because the margins are probably only going to get smaller, and we need to we need cattle that do well on grass, especially if we don't have a feeding operation attached.
Right. And like Sage and I were talking about last week's episode, or maybe it was before we recorded the episode when we were riding around. One of the things that I think may not be as helpful as a lot of guys think it is, it's come out late, in the last few years out of the school that shall not be named, is they like to preach that raising replacement heifers is really expensive. Yeah, it is. It has to be expensive because good cows are expensive and good cows are worth it. And Dallas will probably, throw some shade at me for saying this, but the best replacement heifers are the ones you raise. Like the best way to buy good cows is to buy the ranch they're standing on.
Yeah, I'm actually, my wife and I are signed up for the school that can't be named in January, and I've been kind of mentally preparing myself just from talking from others that have went, what kind of advice we're going to get, because I got a buddy up here in North Dakota that went last year and they ended up selling their whole cow herd and they switched over to yearlings. So it's just like I'm open to whatever. I'm not set in any sort of context, but I'm thinking there's probably going to be some hard truths we gotta face when we go there.
So are you going in January? You said Bismarck.
Rapid City, South Dakota.
You're going to Rapid City. Okay. I don't know who's teaching that one. I might have to find out for you. But I know John Locke was doing the one in Bismarck in January. He got to go do the one in Phoenix like a week or two ago. And as punishment for getting to go to Phoenix in December, he has to go to Bismarck in January.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it though. But I know it's probably going to be a long, probably emotional, stressful week from what I've heard. But it just needs to happen.
You said you're going with your wife.
Yep.
You're not going to be sitting together.
Yep, I know that they're gonna break us up. I listened to that other podcast that Clay guy puts out. I really enjoyed how he kind of chronicled it last year, so you kind of know what to expect.
Yeah, I forgot he did that. That was really neat. The way he did that. One of my favorite things to do is like when I have a good friend that goes to the school, is to call him Sunday afternoon. Be like, "Hey, buddy, how's it going? How you feeling?" Or like text him or not text him the Sunday after the school, but then text him the Monday while the school is going on, like Monday about 5 or 6 o'clock, and just say, "Hey, don't go to the bar because tomorrow's economics and doing numbers with a hangover sucks." Because you just watch. You go down to that bar Monday night and just do a drive-by. There'll be a bunch of guys in there having a legendary time. Because Sunday's kind of a hard day, or I guess it's not a hard day, but it's the icebreaker day. And then Monday, everybody kind of gets to know each other and like, yeah, let's go have a beer. Don't fall in that trap.
Good advice.
Wow, we're bumping up on 2 hours here, buddy. I think we're kind of keeping a promise for the week.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. I really enjoy your podcast, and I really enjoy what you and CK are doing to spread the message. And I can't imagine, you're ranching and you're doing something on the side. So I know you guys got to put a lot of time into this to put out a quality product, and I just appreciate that.
Well, thanks. I have an awful lot of fun doing it. There is some work on the back end. Don't want to spoil anything yet, but there's some changes coming up. CK and I, we're going to have some exciting things coming for the podcast in 2022.
Can't wait.
Where can we find you on social media? How can people get a hold of you to harass you, tell you that you're wrong, argue with you?
I put out most of my content now on TikTok, and my TikTok is at Hungry Man Butte Ranch. but you can friend me on Facebook, Trevor Burian. But most of my content now goes up on TikTok, so you can find me there.
All right. I'll make sure we get them in the show notes. And if you think of anything else, send it over to me.
Will do. Appreciate the time, Brian.
I appreciate you, Trevor. You've been one of my longest supporters of Red Hills Rancher. I can remember seeing Trevor Burian liked your post for at least the last 4 or 5 years. So I want to thank you for your longtime support, and having you on, letting you tell your story. It's just a way that I want to show a little bit of appreciation for your continued support of me and what I've been doing over the years.
Awesome.
All right, and with that, I think we're going to get out of here. Guys, remember, there is no episode next week. We'll be back January 3rd with another episode in 2022. This one closes out 2021 for us. I hope everybody has a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and we'll see you next year.